It's just recording.
Okay. Oh, okay. Now we got it. I'll begin again. Today we're going to talk about the wheel of time and the reappearance of the Christ. How's that?
Okay.
Okay? Since the whole of the conference is on the reappearance of the Christ, I thought we'd get a little more specific about things and make it very practical in terms of the timing of our own lives and putting our own lives in with the bigger picture to see how it all fits in. A lot of us have been feeling stressed over the past few years. That might be a mild way of putting it. But it seems to have been particularly potent over the last couple of years. It's like we're all being pushed forward at a much faster rate, and that we're having to, the bar has been raised. We're having to do clearing work at a much faster rate and to attend to our spiritual practice much more potently. The reason for that is we're in a transition period because there's a new dispensation that's supposed to come out in 2025, as a lot of us have heard. What we're going to talk about today is the scheduling around that, and as it turns out, there is a work that tells what the timing of all this is. It's called the Kalachakra Tantra.
The what?
Kalachakra Tantra. I happened to pick up a copy of it. It's a bit of light reading. This is the condensed version. The original version was in 12,000 verses and was taught for the first time in 881 BC. This particular book is called The Ornament of Stainless Light by Kedrup Northang Gyatso. It's first in a series of 30 books of Tibetan Buddhist wisdom and culture. Okay, so it's put out by, if you want to look it up, it's put out by the Library of Tibetan Classics, and this is volume 14, even though it's the first work of the series. Now, Kedrup Northang Gyatso was I won't say a monk, but he was an itinerant meditator. He'd go around to various sites in Tibet and surrounding areas, and he would teach meditation. And his meditative practice was based on the Kalachakra Tantra. This is a distillation of all that work. This was written back in the 1600s. That's only just been translated into English, full version. So if you can pick it up, I'd highly recommend it, because this book is the basis of all the wisdom teachings that we have in the West. So if you can plow through this and understand it, you don't even need to read the blue books. Right? Well, that being said, it's been said, "Lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of time. Thus saith the Christ." As we know, the Christ is within all of us. We are all part of the Christ. We're all cells in that great body. Points of light within a greater flame. And as our inner flame grows, so the great light grows. That's our task at the moment. That's our task always. So with that in mind, I started looking at the astrology of the great personages through history in terms of Western astrology. That's better. Let us close our minds to the outside interference. Okay. And started looking for patterns, certain things in common with all these great teachers. And lo and behold, there weren't any really great patterns to be found. I started asking myself why. As it turns out, when we get into the constitution of man and things like that, we find out that Western astrology, as it's generally taught, is simply the outer manifestation, the outer wheel. When you want to look at teachings and real reappearance or real externalization of inner states, then you have to look at the cycles on the inner round, the ray cycles. And you don't find any physical correspondences for those. The only information we have on those has been given in Esoteric Psych 2, throughout the Bailey books, but in terms of their duration and when they started and when they're waning. Part of my work over the past 7 years has been a lot to do with Chinese astrology. And I've looked at how it applies to people's lives. At first it seems like a very quaint little system. You know, you go into a Chinese restaurant, you look on the placemat in front of you, and oh, there's my animal sign, you know, I'm an ox or whatever. And it all seems, you know, very nice. But as it turns out, there's a profound wisdom behind it, and Chinese astrology is in fact based on ray cycles. One in particular, the Jupiter cycle. The 4 pillars of Chinese destiny, as it turns out, is based on the exoteric, or the 12-year orbital cycle of Jupiter, and the ray cycle of Jupiter, all meshed into one. Also, as it turns out, when you get this little book here and start looking through in the chronology, you start reading things like the last period of Vaisakha full moon, year of the Iron Dragon. Now, you don't get that in Western works. There are 2 main systems of astrology in the world, as it turns out. Chinese astrology or Oriental astrology evolved pretty much on its own, and it's very ancient. And then you have the Hindu or the Western astrology with the chart wheels, the outer planetary cycles. The Tibetans use them both. And DK himself would have been steeped in both systems. Now, why he would not give that out in the blue books is actually pretty simple, because Westerners would have had no basis for understanding it. In the next dispensation, we'll be given more. Okay, so we'll see how the Oriental system ties in with the Western system and the ray cycles and all that. So my work has been to try to bring that out to the West and to make it much more accessible. Now, I mentioned that the 4 pillars are based on the Jupiter cycle. There are also other cycles in Chinese astrology. The 3rd ray cycle gives you the 9 star key numbers because it's based on a cycle of 9. 9 years, 90 years, 900 years, so on and so forth. There are also 1st ray cycles, because when you progress the pillars, when you go through the Zhu charts, those sorts of things, they're 10-year slots, 100-year slots. So 1, 10, 100,000, that's all 1st ray. And then you have the ray 7 cycle through the 28 notional sius, they're called, or lunar mansions, which are 4 sets of 7. Okay, so you've got 4 of the major ray cycles exhibiting through your basic Chinese astrology. Now, most of us would be familiar with this chart, the Constitution of Man. All of us are familiar with the personal side of things, the lower mind, the emotions, and the physical. Can everyone see?
Can you maximize it?
Maximize it. Oh, yes. There we go. So the orthodox cycles of the planets, the orbital cycles, would apply largely to the physical, the emotional, and the lower mental realms. Of course, there would be higher correspondences as well. But basically, the personal level is the form level. And that's what the outer cycles deal with. When you get into the real Christ energy, which is this area here, the spiritual, intuitional, and higher mental portion of ourselves. That's the real Christ energy. That's where the ray cycles work. And that's what we're seeking to express in the outer life. So if you can marry the chart wheel with the Chinese astrology, then you get a complete picture of the person. And I've found consistently that when I ask people what soul qualities they're seeking to express, it invariably goes straight back to the Chinese astrology. But it's not the year animal or the year pillar that really describes it. It's the day pillar, which we'll look at a bit later. Any questions or comments about that? That's pretty straightforward. Now, these dates don't always correspond with historical dates. Birth of the Buddha, for instance, has generally been listed around 538 BC or somewhere around there. But for some reason, the Kalachakra differs for that. I haven't gone far enough into it yet to really know. But we can see here that about the time of Buddha's enlightenment, we had a strong Ray 2 impulse. Now, the Ray 2, as we were saying, runs in 500-year cycles. And it was said to be coming into manifestation in 1575. So if you count backwards 500-year slots, you get 925 BC for the Ray 2 impulse. So Buddha achieved his enlightenment in 927 BC. The Kalachakra was taught in 881. Okay, the Buddha passed away that same year. So it's like he gave his legacy to the world, he passed on, and it was externalized.
That's just a question.
Yes?
What did you say about the difference in dates between the conventional dates of Buddha being born in 560 or 600 BC?
563.
563 or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not clear as to why they have that chronology in here.
Different Buddha?
Could be, because it said there are many different Buddhas.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or we're talking about it in the lunar calendar. I guess that's still...
Well, these would appear to be solar dates.
Uh-huh.
Mm. Now, the Kalachakra Tantra is a teaching based on what they call the Vajra vehicle. And the Vajra vehicle, spelled V-A-J-R-A, is a psychic body that the meditator builds up during long years of practice, and in which all the attention is focused, and it affects the subtle vehicles. So when you read through the book, it's all the various stages of development of the Vajra vehicle. The implication is it takes about 5,000 years to complete the practice, but who knows how long we've been doing it. Most of us here have had Buddhist lives, I would expect, or we wouldn't have been attracted to the teaching at all.
How old are those 12,000 verses that this one makes from?
It was first taught in 881 BC, right here. And there's a section in here where he talks about it. If I can find it. I won't worry about it right now. We know that the Christ himself as the great being, as the world teacher, the teacher of angels and men and like, the head of the planetary hierarchy. We normally think of Buddhism in terms of first ray, but as it turns out, the entire Kalachakra system is based on cycles of 500, 5,000. So it would appear that the basis of the world teaching would essentially be Kalachakra Tantra. And the Kalachakra Tantra is simply the method that the Buddha gave out, or this particular Buddha, for liberation, which is what the Christ is all about. You know, it's all about stripping away what's not needed and exposing the inner light so that the world can become unified. You know, one light, one faith, one love, all that. In terms of our personal selves, we do respond very much to these 5-year cycles as well, and the Chinese astrology really bears that out. If you sit down and look at your progress pillars and how your life unfolds over time, you do indeed find that there are subjective cycles that correspond to 5 and 10 years, 50 years, so forth. It's a bit foreign to our Western mind, to our understanding of astrology as it is, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, but again, it's like the interface between the inner and outer. Once you become more subjectively focused, once you become more used to your inner pulsation, if you want to call it that, then you do find that there is a resonance with 5 and 10 and the Jupiterian cycles. Now, the various dates of the rays that are involved in Chinese astrology and their manifestation, it's said that the ray 1 is not in manifestation, yet at every century there is a new impulse given. So every century sees a fresh first ray impulse. You also see it at the Wesak moon every year. Ray 2, as I said, has been in manifestation since 1575, Ray 3 since 1425, and Ray 7 since 1675. So if you count back in hundreds of years, you can see how all those rays fit in with this teaching as well. It'd be too involved to do here, so I won't do it. I've just basically taken the second ray and gone through it. Now, it's said that Buddha took his, or achieved his enlightenment at the Kaitra full moon, which is the Aries full moon, in 927 BC. If you do the Western chart for that, or Western style chart, I should say, they gave the name of the ancient city where this happened. The closest I can come up with is, well, it should be Bangalore, but it's the planetary dynamics that are most interesting in that regard. And we have a same alignment right now in the sky that was happening then, the Mars opposing Pluto. That's the stripping away of the monkey mind kind of dynamic. But we see the Taurus sun sextile to Uranus, which is always indicative of great enlightenment, new insights, that sort of thing. We also find that the sun was sextile to the moon, which is also quite expansive. Saturn was square to Uranus, which again is the breakdown of forms, thought forms. Mars Pluto is also, even though it brings suffering initially, brings release from suffering. So we all have that to look forward to in the next little bit. But just from a general overview, you get an idea that of what his enlightenment process was about. And we're told he had a sixth-ray mind, so it was very fiery, focused mind, if you've read about the Buddha's life at all. When you come up with the Buddha's chart itself, given the Kalachakra date, it's quite interesting. We've heard the term monkey mind before. And he was born in the year of the metal monkey, according to the Kalachakra date. We also find that it's called monkey eating fruit. But metal, in terms of any kind of Chinese astrology, means standing firm in your discipline, being forthright, communicating yourself in a very truthful manner. So it's all about truth, standing in your center, and developing your own inner strength, which he did. The other thing you find with Chinese astrology is the symbolism of it pervades the whole life. We're just going to focus on universals for the moment. And the year pillar relates to universals. Monkey eating fruit means outcomes are successful due to careful past planning. The material prospects are highly favored. Correct decisions have been made. The combined element of pomegranate wood means valuable things are treasured and bring great gains. Well, in his case, the great gain was the mental process and the release from suffering. So when all is lost, everything is gained, sort of thing. Yes?
His birth time. I mean, was it written that he was born at dawn or something?
No, as I said, I'm not worried about the birth time, not the particulars at the moment. It gives me the year. I know he was born a Taurian, so that will give me the correct year.
The ascent, or you didn't have the ascendant?
No, it's not a correct ascendant. No. All these charts are hypothetical at the moment, but it does give you some idea of what's going on. Now, the thing about it is that given that he was born with that year pillar, we're all born with a year pillar as well. And if you know what the Chinese animal is, it says a lot about what you're seeking to express in the outer world in terms of year pillar. There are 12 Chinese animals, just like there are 12 signs in the zodiac. Each one of them is governed by one of the 5 elements. The Chinese and Orientals in general use 5 elements instead of 4. The 5 elements as they are fire, earth, metal, which corresponds with Western air, water, and wood, which corresponds with our Western notion of ether. So wood is expansive. If you think in terms of ether, then you get the connotation of wood. It's growth, expansion, vitality, life force, that sort of thing. Metal corresponds with the animal spirit. It's the breath. It's another kind of life force too, but without breath we have no strength. And actually metal refers a lot to meditative practice as well, because the breathing exposes the actual state of the mind. Okay, so when the mind is still, the breath stops. Okay. So again, with the metal in this Buddha's chart, we see that there would have been a lot of practice around breath control. And in fact, in the Kalachakra Tantra, they talk a lot about breath control. The control of the Vajra body is done through the breath, the alternating between the left and right channels in the body. Pranayama. Now, in terms of his enlightenment, was achieved in year 881, which gives horse in the clouds. Now, horse in Chinese astrology is the strongest of the Chinese animals. It's also worthy of note that a true Chinese astrologer will never use animals in describing phases. The 12 animals are simply descriptions for easy remembrance of phases within their zodiac. So the horse corresponds to the 7th phase, or the balance point, but it's considered a very strong point. It's said that there are more despots born in horse years than any other year, especially in fire years, even though enlightenment was achieved in a wood year. The general meaning of that we'll see. With the wood horse, all things are possible under the sun, and the sun warms the hearts of your detractors. With sufficient determined action, all things can become realities. Well, that's quite a statement in terms of actual teachings. If you've read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which the Kalachakra is another manifestation of, you do indeed find that all things are possible if you find the right point of concentration. It's like concentrating on the pole star gives you knowledge of all the cycles of heaven. Concentration on the moon gives you knowledge of all the lunar vehicles, so on and so forth. So with the expansive wood element, you do get knowledge of everything. Now, the first cycle of the Kalachakra Tantra, the first 500 years was called the era of the Arat, or the adept. So the Buddha achieved his enlightenment, and that set the tone for the 500 years. And that was the attainment that was aimed for in that first 500 years. We also have in the Kalachakra the dates of the installment of all the Shambhala kings. So the first Shambhala king was Sikandra, the manifestation of Vajrapani, one of the great devas. And he was the one who codified all the Kalachakra Tantra into the 12,000 verses. The next one came in 877. Pardon? Yes.
That's fantastic. You get any ideas about this Sikandra's relationship with Saint Kamara or anything like that?
Well, he'd be a representative of him.
Do you think he was one of the masters? Not necessarily.
Well, he would have been a master, I would say.
Okay.
In fact, I would say all these kings would be. And they come in 100-year cycles.
I wonder whether there's a Manu or something like that.
I don't know the Manus said to last through the whole age, but there'd be sub-Manus, I would expect. Yeah. The first Shambhala kings, most of them were manifestations of great Devic deities. I haven't bothered to put them in, but they're all in the book, if you get the book. And most of these great manifestations we would have never heard of. Philip, just out of interest, what year did you ascribe to the birth of Jesus?
The channel related to the most was Zip Dolan's one. It was for, I think it was 7 BC.
7 BC.
It was, in Sullenberger, Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Pisces.
Yeah.
And it has a moon, a Sun-Pluto conjunction in
Yeah.
Very
Repeat that for the name.
Okay, that's 7 BC. Jupiter's Saturn conjunction in Virgo
Pisces.
and Pisces. Yeah. Sun-Pluto conjunction. What else did you say?
And Moon in Aquarius.
Moon in Aquarius.
And I can't remember where the rising sun is.
Yeah, they said he.
Gemini rising.
Okay, Gemini rising. Yeah, he said he came bearing a sword. Sun-Pluto conjunction. Yeah, it certainly seems to fit. Well, if we go to 7 BC, we don't really find anything around there, but we do find a Shambhala king at about 24, which would be shortly after the death of Jesus, if he lived 33 years. We don't know exactly. There are names for each of the 500-year cycles. We'll go through them as we go through the talk. But as I said, the first one was the year, the cycle of the Arat. The next one was the 500-year cycle of the non-returner. This is a person who escapes from the wheel of birth and death, so they don't come back. This is the goal of all liberative practice. Now that particular cycle began in 381 BC. And if you look at the birth of various religions throughout the world, you find correspondences roughly with some of these dates. As we'll see in a minute, the birth of Islam corresponded very closely with one of the historical dates here. The next cycle was the 500-year cycle of the Stream Enterer in 120 AD. This was a time when the early Christian church was really being developed. Now, the Stream Enterer is refers to the fact that it's like the chela on the thread. Connection with the universal consciousness, the ability to bring that universal consciousness into full manifestation on earth. So when the Vajra body is perfected, when liberation has been achieved, then you have a clear channel between the universal and the specific. The next 500-year cycle was in 620, and that began the cycle of special insight. Now, it was about this time that Islam was born. And we get something very interesting around that. In 624, I believe it's 2 years after the institution of Islam, there were great battles in the Arabian Peninsula. And that was a wood monkey year. The barbarians arrived in Makkah, which is in Yemen. The inference here being the barbarians were the Islamists. Barbarians is used in quotes, meaning that they didn't really consider them barbarians. It was just a different expression. But it was said that their dharma was to remain there 1,800 years. So at the end of the Kalachakra Tantra, we see that in 2424, the Shambhala king Rudikakri defeats the barbarians in his 98th year, and it begins the last 4-year period, the later 4 periods, which will last 1,800 years, and that's a time of great peace on the planet. So we see we have a while to go before we achieve any great lasting peace in this world. And if you look at the ways of the world now, you can see it's not going to happen overnight. There's going to be infighting and all that for a long time to come.
Relatively speaking, 40 years isn't that long a time.
Well, true. If you want to be very geologic about it, it's nothing. It's a blink of an eye. Yes.
What connection, if any, Martin, do you make with the narrow cycle, the 600-year cycle, and this 500-year cycle?
Well, the 600-year cycle is a sixth ray cycle.
Okay.
That's the subjective cycle of the six rays, nearly as we can determine it. There would be interweaving, overlapping, with the 500-year cycles.
Right.
That's a study in itself,
Yes.
and it would show where the religions like Christianity and Islam would have come in, but they have their own time cycle as well. As we were just seeing, the Islam started at about 620. I don't know what. How did your knowledge tie in with that? Does one of those cycles correspond roughly with that year 620?
It's only a 100-year difference, but the birth of a great leader, great king.
Yeah.
You can trace it back to. You can go back to Akhenaten in 1200.
Yeah.
And then you have Buddha 600 BC. You have the Christ at 088 CE, whatever,
Yeah.
whether it's 29 or whether it's, that's variable. So you can see the 600, and then 600 ACE, you have Prophet Muhammad.
Yep.
And then you have, in 1200, that's debatable because that's, 1200, what happened in 1200, what happened in 1800,
Yeah.
what's expected to happen in 24.
Mm.
The 2400 is, that's around the appearance. And
Yeah.
so it's all lining up.
Yeah. Well, that's the 2400 corresponds to the defeat of the barbarians and the 1800 years of peace after that. So the Christ would have pretty much done the work of defeating the forces of darkness and bringing that era of peace in. The golden age that we hear so much about. In the blue books, he talks about a 500-year cycle in terms of teaching, but not necessarily teachers themselves. So that might be the difference that we're seeing.
So are you saying that the 500 is connected with the fifth ray? And
No, second ray.
I'm sorry, second ray, and the 600 would be connected with the sixth ray?
Yeah. And the 2 and the 6 go very well together in terms of world teaching, because it does often take a very fiery personage or energy to cement that kind of new dynamic into the world fabric, if you will.
Islam is a six-ray religion.
Pardon?
Islam is a six-ray religion.
That's right. And Jesus was a very strong six-ray exponent. Yeah. The Buddha had a six-ray mind.
You could say Newton was six, because he's called a heretic.
I'm just afraid it's not picking up.
Oh,
Why don't you stand up and...
well, I'm done.
Yeah, well, basically, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'll just come stand next to people next time. Now we're told the next dispensation is to come in 2025. If we count forward from 1575, that's pretty close. So every 50 years you get like a renewal of the teaching. So you had a great dispensation through Blavatsky around 1875. Bailey started her work around 1925. You had the real birth of the computer age around 1975. The internet shortly after that. The great media interconnections that we see now. And you wonder how we ever survived without email, waiting at the mailbox days for letters. So in 2025, we're due to receive another dispensation, and 2 years after that, you have the installation of Narasimha, the next Shambhala king. So you have two 50-year cycles and the installation of a new Shambhala king. So the new Shambhala king cements the teaching in place in a very real sense, and gives it the force to continue. In 2120, we have the 500-year cycle of Abhidharma, which is it gets down to the real nuts and bolts of what Buddhism is, the real technical side of Buddhism. So we'll have the new dispensation in 2025, and then in 2120, the institution of the new 500-year cycle. So the new dispensation is going to pave the way for the great technical understanding to come. And if you look at the pace of the world today, you can see how there would be a very technical side to the new world religion. Now, it's my understanding that all these 500-year cycles start at the Aries full moon. And I say the Aries full moon because that's when the new impulse for the year is usually given. We're currently, let me find the chart. We're currently in the era of morality, which started in 1620. And there has been a heavy emphasis on morals in the past 400 years, especially as the sixth ray is starting to wane. So the forces of the sixth ray are trying to keep the status quo, trying to hold the morality, the old ways, while the seventh ray is starting to break everything up and make way for the new religion. Do you have a question, or you just?
I was going to mention 1625 was the passing out of the sixth ray.
Yeah, that's right. That's when it started to wane.
I mentioned too that those dates that the DK gives in Psych 2 or whatever it is, Psych 1, page 30 or whatever it is, of all those ray cycles. There is one particular qualifying statement he has underneath there, which I overlooked and I actually recently found again, and that is that those cycles apply to the Piscean age.
Yeah.
They may not necessarily apply to future or past ages.
Oh, that's
so
right.
It's something to bear in mind because there are so many overlapping cycles and so many octaves and harmonics of cycles. So it can get very confusing.
Yeah, that's right. You can't draw any hard and fast rules, and everything that we're given is within a very narrow segment of time. Things do shift and mutate. It's like the manifestation of the fifth ray. It was withdrawn early because it did its work
Indeed.
so well. Now, this is a proposed chart. If we look at the institution for the era of morality in 1620, it's full moon of Aries, 17th of April. Again, it's for Bangalore, India. You don't know exactly where it happened, so the ascendant could be anything. But the planetary dynamics are suggestive. You have a Moon-Jupiter conjunction, very tight conjunction, actually. Square to Uranus. So you have a T-square with Uranus at the apex. Jupiter is sextile to Chiron, and Chiron is trine the moon, so Chiron is well placed in this chart, and there is a lot there about healing, bringing people together eventually. And this, as you find, especially if you look at solar returns, cycles in general, that really you don't reap the full benefit of a cycle until the very end of it. Okay, so if you look at a solar return, you look to the end of the solar return to see how it's all going to really turn out, even though the commencement will show you the general tone for the year. So the general tone for the age of morality is actually quite positive, quite expansive. And from 1620 on, the world has seen tremendous progress made in a lot of areas. even though the forces of materialism have been very strong at that time as well. But you see the growth of Protestantism, the industrial age, the breakdown of so many barriers. The Sun-Jupiter conjunction is all about the material increase, and also the coming together of so many people. That's when you started to see travel throughout the world by ship initially, and then by air. So, yes, we find that the Western astrology does indeed describe the general tone of these cycles. If you look at the Chinese side of this, now this ascendant would be correct because it's specific, or the day would anyway. Again, we find a monkey in the year, and it's a double metal emphasis. So metal also applies to entrepreneurial pursuits, making money. And there's been a tremendous material impulse given since 1620. Again, the emphasis on pomegranate wood. This is the same year pillar that the proposed Buddha that brought forward these teachings had in his chart. So there's like a return to center at this point. And as we know, if it is the same Buddha, he went through all these ascetic practices until he finally arrived at the conclusion that they weren't really necessary, and that all he had to do was just let go. And this is what we're being taught toward the end of this particular 500-year cycle. We're all learning to let go of our past so that we can move forward into a brighter future. The age of morality, as I was saying, brought a close to the iron fist of the church in the Middle Ages. It brought the freedom of the individual. There's a lot we could say about that, but we'll get to that a bit later. So as the names of some of these cycles we've mentioned, the era of non-returner, the era of the stream enterer, the era of special insight. The one just previous to this current era is the era of meditative concentration. And that's where you saw the institution of a lot of the Buddhist monasteries in Tibet. And a lot of the monasteries, the better known monasteries in Europe. So there was a big emphasis on total concentration on God, on the inner states, and on one's own spiritual practice. It might be helpful to look at that one too. Again, we see yang metal in evidence in the stem for the year. The rat describes the first cycle. It's a cycle of commencement. So when one enters the monastery, one commences spiritual life in terms of regimented practice. The yang metal describes a phase wherein the practice has to be adhered to. The focus of the meditation has to be firm, without deviation. If we look at the Western chart for that, again we find a T-square with Uranus at the apex. The thing you find if you study astrology long enough is that Uranus does cause one to really focus, because it does disrupt the life, and you have to focus on what is essential in the life when Uranus comes along and tears everything to pieces. But in that focused concentration, you do get profound flashes of insight. You know, the new is allowed to drop in and to establish new order. So when one takes the vows and enters the new order, you know, it very much describes the Uranian influence, because the past has to be let go. We also find a Sun-Pluto conjunction, again describing very much that one-pointed focus and the need to let go of all non-essentials. We find that sextile to Jupiter this time instead of conjunct, so there is a great expansion of consciousness that comes from this meditative practice. I mean, it sounds like a bit of a reach, but if you really look at it, you can see how both the Western and the Chinese charts do describe these 500-year eras as they come up. Now, we could look at the era of Abhidharma, but it wouldn't be much point because we won't be here, seeing as it doesn't occur until about 2120. The thing about the appearance of any world teacher, though, is that there usually is some new religion or some new order established in terms of philosophies and that sort of thing. And from the reappearance of the Christ, we have this little section here. Now, it's said that the Christ will begin, if all things are well, to reappear or after 2025 or somewhere thereabouts. There has to be a concerted effort for the forces of materialism to be pushed aside for all of us to do our work, and this is another reason why we're all having to let go of so much, all having to adhere so strongly to our practice, all having to just be in the moment at any one time. And that being in the moment is actually quite a hard thing to do if the mind is so distracted. But once the cycle is instituted, once the Christ as a great being begins to reappear, we have the following. He says, I've already indicated to you the form that the religion of the New Age will take. It will be built around the periods of the full moon, wherein certain great approaches will be made to the world of reality. Also around 2 periods of massed approaches to be made at the time of the major eclipse of the moon and of the sun during the year. Now, Nicholas, have you and Philip looked at these eclipses in terms of the great approaches?
Sorry, what was that?
In terms of 2 massed approaches at the times of the major eclipses of the year.
Yeah, I know this quote. What was the question?
Pardon?
I know this quote, but what was the question? I didn't hear what you said.
Well, we all know about the 3 major festivals, the Aries, Wesak, and the Goodwill. But so far we haven't heard too much about the eclipses.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, what was the question? Have I done much work with it?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, neither have I. You
Yeah.
know, but there is an avenue of research there.
Sure is. It's such a big doorway for eclipses.
Yeah, and the fact is, you have 2 sets of eclipses every year, so it's a matter of deciding which one. Nicholas, have you done anything with that?
Let's see, what could I say about that? Eclipses are of different kinds, right? And there's all this study of mother eclipses, right? So they come in series, and they have a foundational pattern which generate a series of other eclipses following that. So I guess that in itself is a very interesting study, but exactly how it would relate to this, remains to be seen, probably.
Yeah.
But eclipses indeed are a very important study, and we do know that they are very potent influences astrologically, and in a way I would see how they relate to the coming and the going of rays, actually.
Hmm.
So that would be all tied in somehow.
Yeah. The theme of the eclipses is you have the actual eclipse itself, and then there are events that get triggered as planets transit to the conjunction or opposite point, largely. And these periods can last for several years. So there is an approach that's made, then you have a defining event or events around the eclipse. And one of the best examples we have of that is 9/11. The Shambhala impact and the tremendous world events that followed upon that. You can see two sides of the coin. You can see the forces of materialism at work with all the dealings behind the scenes, but you can also see that the world is being brought together, and there is a lot of good that's coming from all that's going on. So it does show you that there are great approaches made at the times of eclipses. But just to continue with this, the two major full moon approaches will be those of the Wesak full moon and the full moon of June, one hitherto concentrated to the Buddha, who embodied the wisdom of God, and the other to the Bodhisattva, known to Christians as the Christ, who embodied the love of God. The platform of the New World Religion will have in it three major presentations of truth, or three major doctrines, if such an undesirable word can be permitted. It is with the elaboration of these 3 points of view, or evocations of truth, that the work of the sixth group of disciples will be concerned. They are the fact of the Spirit of God, both transcendent and immanent, will be demonstrated, and also a similar fact in relation to man. The mode of their approach to each other via the soul will be indicated. This aspect of the emerging truth might be called transcendental mysticism. So you always get very potent mystical quality around New World religions, or any religions. The fact of the divine quality of the forces in nature and in man, and the method of their utilization for divine purposes by man. This might be called transcendental occultism. Third, the fact implied in the first that humanity as a whole is an expression of divinity, a complete expression, plus the allied fact of the divine nature and work of the planetary hierarchy, and the mode of the approach of these two groups in group form to each other. This might be called transcendental religion. And it's said that the New World Religion will incorporate everything from the old religions as well, and that certain of the old religions will die out.
I think it's going to be religion. I don't think it's religion.
It won't be religion as we know it, I don't think. No. It's not going to have, the New World religion is not going to have the strong sixth ray emphasis that religions in the past have, because we are passing out of the Piscean age, and by 2117, we'll be pretty much into the Aquarian age. We are in a transition period at the moment. Really, when you come down to it, it's very difficult for anyone to say definitively when the great teacher will come, when any great teacher will come. The Vatican has a huge staff of astrologers that look at this every day, and all events are examined to see if the coming one is arriving. Well, they haven't made any great pronouncements yet. And if they have that many astrologers working on it and they can't tell us definitively, then I don't know that any of us would be able to. But we can at least look at what's been given in terms of teachings from the past, in terms of Kalachakra Tantra, to see where the trends are. And at least by knowing the trends, we know pretty much where we are. In terms of the individual, and in terms of an integrated astrology, Eastern and Western, if you want to have a closer look at what the subjective cycles are in your own life, then you'd have to look to your Chinese charts. Most specifically, your 4 pillars. So if you know the animal sign of the year, which basically describes a phase, then that will give you how you were related to the society at large in which you were born. The year pillar in Chinese astrology relates to one's ancestors, extended family, and to the social group to which one belongs. If you want a full expression of what the self is, you have to look to the day pillar. The year pillar is generational. It applies to the 12-year cycle of Jupiter. The day pillar corresponds to the degree of the sun. So it's very much like the solar degree in a Western chart. With the hour pillar, you get the legacy, the higher possibilities that one leaves to the world, because that applies to the ascendant. So the hour pillar is ascribed to children, friends, and creative output. That leaves us with the month pillar. And the month pillar describes the immediate family, the physical typology which you have. This corresponds to the sun's sign, because it corresponds to the lunar month, which is roughly about 28, 29 days. When you put all these factors together, you get a fairly complete picture of what the individual is expressing subjectively, what the Christ light inside is seeking to express in the outer world. And when you put this with the Western style chart, the chart wheel, then you get a complete picture. And this is the astrology that the Eastern masters use. This is the type of astrology that DK would have used. Still does use, as far as I know. Now, are there any questions up to this point? Yes.
Well, in esoteric astrology, we have learned how important the ascendant is.
Yes.
In showing the way of the soul, as it were. So you say that in Chinese astrology, the hour pillar would relate more to the ascendant.
Yes.
Would that then mean that the hour pillar also more would show the way of the soul in that respect?
Yeah, it is kind of the life path of the soul and the legacy that the life leaves behind. In terms of Western astrology with the ascendant, it's one's self-expression in orthodox terms. It's what we, in what we express to the world, that's the impression we leave behind with people. It's the essence of being in a lot of ways. In the essence of being, you find creation, you find the anchoring of the inner within the outer world. So if the person can fully express the day pillar, the essential energy that they are, and interact with the world in a very positive manner, then that combined effect gives the hour pillar. You get the same thing in Western astrology. When the person expresses their sun sign most effectively in the world, it gives like a synthetic expression, which you could call an ascendant or, self-expression. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. There's really no difference between the two. It's just it just seems a foreign way of putting it. Any other questions so far? All right. In the coming years, as Chinese astrology becomes more known, as we come to know more and more what the East has to offer, and as the East and West become closer and closer through internet, through travel, we will see a further integration of the astrological methods and a further integration of the Buddhist teachings, the Christian teachings, all the teachings coming together as one. In 2120, we have the ending of the cycle of morality and the beginning of the real technical knowledge of occultism. This is when the real mystery schools will really take root. You'll find sporadic indications of them over the next century, but it really take a while before there's enough teaching really in place to have potent, effective, true esoteric occult schools, schools that teach, advanced schools, I'm saying, meditative schools. Because it's going to take a knowledge of the Vajra bodies, knowledge of the Yoga Sutras, of Kalachakra Tantra, and it's going to take having people trained in that in the physical plane all over the world before these things can really take shape. So it's a long-term work. It's a work in progress. And we're making the seeds for that right now. In a true mental grasp of what's going on in our inner lives, we begin to see how to manifest these things within the earth. We come to some sort of realization of what Abhidharma would actually mean. So far, for most people, all this is just pie in the sky. It's just nice concepts. It has no real value in the outer life. And yet, when you start a meditative life and you adhere to your practice, when you keep the practice up every day, you can look back at a year's work, 10 years' work, and you know that great progress has been made. And that shows the value of keeping up with the practice. It's the real seventh ray thing of constant renewal every day, of constant reaffirmation of the inner life, the Christ within. Yes?
Berkeley University in the 70s didn't have a meditation program, and today it has a meditation program for its students.
Yes.
And they've proved now that with meditation the students actually get better results.
That's right. Yeah, and we're going to see this kind of thing increasingly shown. From the institution of the first teaching of the Kalachakra, we see that there's been a slow progression through time. There have been mystery schools set up. Part of the legacy of the sixth ray is this great secrecy between various outposts of the inner wisdom, not wanting to mix, not wanting to share their knowledge. Now with the incoming of the seventh ray, the Aquarian age, we're going to see much more blending. We're already seeing it. Now all the boundaries are coming down. And as well as the outer boundaries in the world, we see the boundaries within ourselves coming down. We find that what 20 years ago may have seemed an impossibility is a daily change within our lives, and often in many ways. And that we can't adhere to any fond notions of things that we had in the past, that we have to be ready to change at a moment's notice. So there is a very strong impulse coming through now, and we all have to move with it. We all have to be ready to take up with the new and to let go of the old. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
I'm wondering about, you mentioned an impulse for the second ray of 500 years.
Yes.
Is there any wave function or shape to this impulse? It just is on for 500 years and off for 500 years, or is it sinusoidal, or is it trapezoidal, or
No, it's sinusoidal.
sinusoidal?
Yeah, and he says as much. That each of these rays will wax in power and then it will wane. So the second ray waxed for 250 years. Now it's starting to wane again. So 1575, you can do the math. It'd be pretty much on its way out, but then it'll start a new impulse later on this century. Okay. Just because it's been on its way out doesn't mean it's not effective, though, because you have other rays that are complementary to that are working now. The seventh ray is coming in, that's complementary. The fifth ray is very complementary to the second ray, especially on the wisdom side. And there's been tremendous progress made in scientific knowledge since that ray came in. So you find rays supporting, you find other rays that are inimical, like the passing out 6, well, actually 2 and 6 can be rather close too. So there has been a carryover with the other rays, even though the second ray has been passing out. And when it begins to wax again, as the Christ begins to reappear, you'll find a lot of strengthening in that. And the fourth ray is supposed to come in slowly after 2025 as well. And that has it's been conjectured a 250-year cycle, 2,500-year cycle, so on and so forth.
So when you say 500, that's from when it starts waxing until it starts waxing again.
Yes, that's right.
500 years later.
Yeah.
All right.
And then there's a larger 5,000-year cycle, and we don't know what part of that we're in.
Thank you.
Yes.
How does that fit in with the Mayan calendar?
I'm not a student of Mayan astrology, so I can't really answer it. Does anyone here know? No, sorry. Well, if there are no other questions, in wrapping up then, I would recommend that everyone rush out right now and get a copy of this, and a little bit of light reading at night before you go to bed. Learn all about that Vajra body of yours and how to construct it, because in the end analysis, we're all going to be taught this stuff. And soon, yes.
Have you, in reading through that, noticed anything that parallels the 6 stages of building the Antakarna?
It's all in here.
It is.
Yeah.
Even more so than what's in the rays?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's a very technically explicit book in a lot of ways. And it goes beyond what's given in the blue books. The blue books essentially are written for the masses. This is written for the earnest student, the one who really is going to sit down and do the work.
Is our bookstore carrying this?
I don't think so.
I think so.
The best place to go is Amazon. You can get it for about $30. If you buy it in a lot of bookstores, I saw it in Australia for $120.
Right.
So.
The ornament of what now?
Pardon?
The ornament of light?
Could we pass it around?
Yes.
Can you give us the ISBN? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll give you the ISBN number. If I can find it. 0-861 71 452 0. Okay.
Thank you.
Could you pass it around just so we
Yeah.
can look at it?
Yeah, just have a quick thumb through.
What's about 1,500 pages?
Yeah, something like that.
Thank you, Malvin.
Thank you.
We're here to answer any questions after.
Hmm.
Can I shut that off? Can I just shut that off?
Understand this.